This is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady, having a ball on my Kiss loom, making double comfort slippers. You can make some too. Let's get going. I'm knitting the very last few stitches of the whole short rowing sequence on the final short rowing out row. All of these are normal. This one, of course, had 3 wraps because it wasn't knitted last time. And there we are. That heel is finished. I'm going to wrap the adjoining stitch so that I can resume knitting around in the direction that I originally started. And we'll be knitting the foot next. While I start knitting the foot, I want to tell you a couple of secrets about heel knitting, but you have to promise to keep this between us. Do not tell the fashion police. Naturally, it is best if you get your short rowing sequence just exactly perfect. Never fail to knit a stitch that should be knitted. Never hold a stitch for 2 rows. And probably you won't ever mess up. But I have messed up, and some of my socks have little fudges in them where I evened up the row count even though I had to knit a row with the same number of stitches as last time and rack the next stitch over or something like that because somehow I had lost count. Our lives have a lot of distractions. It can happen. And really, if it's not a big, huge mess up, if it's only a 1 row issue, you can't even tell by looking unless you examine very closely. And your feet are not bothered by it when they're in your socks and shoes. And I think maybe life is too short to stress over it. If it makes an acceptable heel, let it alone. Don't feel you have to frog everything. Now, I don't think there are any imperfections in this heel. It looks good to me. And I didn't catch myself messing up the count in any way. But if later when I get it off I find that I have and yet my foot fits in it smoothly, I'm just going to leave it alone. Now what we're doing here is now knitting the length of the foot that goes from the completion of the heel to the beginning of the toe shaping. This is very easy knitting, just round and round. If you're figuring your own math, what you need to do is know the total number of rows involved in the length of the foot. Let's just use a round number while I knit and talk this through. Just say you're aiming for a sock 10 inches long and you get 5 rows per inch. 10 times 5 is 50 total rows that you want. From that total, subtract, I didn't finish knitting this row over. Let's do that. From the total of 50 rows that you need for your foot length, what I'm knitting right now, you need to subtract the rows that have already been added to the foot length by knitting the heel. If you used your own short rowing sequence, then you just need to figure out when you began short rowing out, how many rows did you knit on some rather than all of the pegs. For the toe shaping, you need to figure out the same thing. How much length is involved in the toe? In most socks, the heel and the toe will be the same. This distance is heel shaping. There is about the same distance here in toe shaping, but you can't count on it being the same. And I actually know it's a little bit less because we've decreased in a different manner, which we'll get to shortly. There are, in fact, 8 rows of toe shaping in this design. So just say you had 10 rows of heel shaping, 8 rows of toe shaping, and 50 that are needed for the total length of the slipper. From 50, you would subtract these 10, leaving 40, and then you would subtract 8 more, leaving 32, and that would be the number of rows you needed between the shapings. If you have my book, Socks of All Sorts for Knitting Looms, there is a chart to help you with that. You don't have to do the math, but the math is not onerous if you need to do the math. Okay, I am ready to knit on. So in my case, I'm going to have to double check my notes, but I think that I have 30 rows, or 30 complete rounds in fact, that I want to knit before I begin the toe shaping. When I have checked and knitted my rounds and you have checked and knitted your rounds, we will meet up and we'll shape our toes together.